I think there were not many people who understood just how broad his interests were and how supportive he was of an astonishingly wide range of organisations.
A solo royal engagement like this. They won't use the word officially, but in effect he's retiring from the role he's played in public life for more than 60 years.
For years, the British tabloids went all in on a story the palace wouldn't confirm or deny, and it got people talking like crazy. Britain's most adored royal couple, married for over 70 years, were said to be living apart, not just different rooms or separate wings, but miles away from each other. One stayed at the center of royal power, while the other lived quietly in a simple farmhouse near the Norfolk coast. The rumors hit hard, the headlines were brutal, and the public couldn't stop asking questions. Now things take a sharp turn. Princess Anne, known for being direct and not sugarcoating anything, has finally spoken up, and what she shared flips the entire narrative. Everything people thought they knew about Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip's marriage suddenly feels incomplete. Stay locked in, because this story isn't what the tabloids pushed. It's deeper, stronger, and way more real than expected. Let's rewind to 2017 because that's where the noise really started. Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, made a historic move. He retired from public duties at 96 after completing over 22,000 solo engagements across 65 years. Think about that number for a second. 22,000. That's not just work. That's a lifetime of non-stop duty on a level most people can't even imagine. Naturally, people assumed he'd settle down next to the Queen at Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle, just like any couple would after decades together. That's the usual picture, right? You slow down, you stay close, you enjoy peace side by side. But Philip didn't follow that script, not even close. Instead, he moved to Wood Farm, a quiet 5-bedroom cottage hidden away on the Sandringham estate, far from where the Queen continued her official role. No gold ceilings, no grand halls, no constant staff walking around, just a simple farmhouse with wooden beams and a view of the sea. And the tabloids? They went wild. "Royal rift," one headline yelled. Another claimed, "Philip abandons palace." After more than 70 years of marriage, people were shocked and confused. But here's the part almost nobody in the press stopped to really think about. What if they got it completely wrong? What if this wasn't about distance or problems at all, but something way more solid, more grown, and honestly more meaningful than gossip could ever explain? That's exactly what Princess Anne is now making clear, and to understand it, you have to go way back. Before Wood Farm, before retirement, before all the headlines, the real story starts in 1947. Because this so-called unusual setup didn't suddenly appear late in life, it was there from the very beginning. When Elizabeth and Philip settled into Clarence House in 1949 as newlyweds, they didn't share a bedroom. And here's the twist. It wasn't hidden or dramatic at all. In their world, that was completely normal. Lady Pamela Hicks, Philip's cousin and one of the Queen's closest aides, explained it openly in her writing. She described how many upper-class British couples kept separate bedrooms, not because of distance, but for comfort and personal space. The reasoning was simple but powerful. You protect your rest, you keep your routine, but when you want closeness, you choose it. And that choice? That's where the real connection comes in. Think about that for a second. The choice itself creates the bond. This wasn't cold or distant, it was intentional. From day one, they understood something that people are only starting to talk about more now, that love doesn't need constant closeness to stay strong. Two people can be fully committed while still respecting each other's need for quiet and independence. Their rooms at Clarence House were right next to each other with connecting doors. They could be together anytime. They just weren't forced into it. And this setup followed them everywhere. Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, Balmoral, Sandringham, every residence had the same arrangement.
For more than 7 decades, Prince Philip stood dutifully behind his wife in the longest marriage in British royal history.
Today, a funeral service will take place for Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. Let's take you to the scene live in Windsor, just west of London.
For over 70 years, from 1947 until Philip's passing in 2021, this is how they lived. So when Philip moved to Wood Farm in 2017, it wasn't some shocking break from tradition. It was actually a continuation of it. He was simply taking that same principle and stretching it further. The idea that a strong relationship gives both people room to breathe and be themselves. And Princess Anne, who saw this dynamic up close her entire life, understood it better than most. Now let's talk about Wood Farm itself, because this place says a lot more than people realized. This wasn't just a quiet getaway, it was a reflection of who Prince Philip really was when all the formal roles were stripped away. Located on the Sandringham estate, the cottage sits about 2 miles from the main house, overlooking the sea. It's calm, simple, and honestly pretty modest compared to royal standards. When Philip moved in, he didn't just settle, he made it his own in every way. He had a new kitchen put in, decorated the walls with his watercolor paintings, and rearranged the rooms exactly how he liked them. This wasn't random, it meant something. Think about his life before that moment. For decades, he lived in spaces designed by others, run by strict rules, shaped by tradition and protocol. Every step, every room, every detail followed a system that left little space for personal choice. He stood behind the Queen in public, carried out his duties, and set aside parts of himself for the role he held. And then at 96, in a quiet farmhouse by the sea, he finally had full control over his own space. His art on the walls, his layout, his pace, his routine. No pressure, no spotlight, just a life that felt completely his. He painted watercolors, something he had loved for years but rarely had time to really enjoy. During his decades of service, he also read constantly, diving deep into books whenever he could. And yes, he even ran a small truffle farm on the grounds, something most people would never expect from a royal figure. He invited friends over too, creating a relaxed space that palace life rarely allowed. And here's a detail that really stands out. The staff at Wood Farm didn't wear uniforms. That might sound small, but in royal terms, it's huge. The monarchy runs on structure, visuals, and clear hierarchy. Everything has its place and its rules. At Buckingham Palace, every staff member has a uniform, a role, and a strict way of doing things. But at Wood Farm, none of that existed. Just people, living simply, no pressure, no performance. And when Queen Elizabeth visited, and she did more often than people realized, she didn't act like a monarch in a grand setting. She stepped right into that simple life. She cooked meals, she cleaned up, she stood at the sink doing dishes like anyone else. The image of the Queen of England washing plates in a quiet Norfolk cottage says everything. It flips the whole narrative on its head. Because Wood Farm wasn't distance, it was real connection. It wasn't about stepping away from the marriage, it was about showing what that marriage actually was at its core. And now Princess Anne has stepped in and made that crystal clear. This is where things really hit. Princess Anne, known for being straight to the point and never putting on a show for the cameras, has spoken openly about her parents' relationship, and what she said carries weight. She's always protected her family's private reality, so when she talks, people listen. And what she's saying changes the entire perspective. According to Anne, the public, and especially the tabloids, completely misunderstood what was going on. The idea that her parents had a distant or broken relationship wasn't just inaccurate, it was deeply unfair. In her view, and in the eyes of those closest to them, this was one of the strongest partnerships out there. She makes one thing very clear: the distance between Buckingham Palace and Wood Farm was never emotional. It was built on respect, real, deep, unshakable respect. Her mother didn't have a job you could just pause or walk away from. This wasn't a normal role, it was a lifelong constitutional duty. The Queen's presence was required constantly, meeting prime ministers, hosting state events, welcoming global leaders, maintaining a system that never slows down. She committed to that life at just 21 and stayed consistent every single day after. There were no breaks, no stepping back. Meanwhile, Prince Philip had earned something rare: true rest. And Princess Anne speaks about that with a mix of pride and quiet emotion. He gave up a naval career he genuinely loved and excelled in. He gave up personal recognition and stepped into a supporting role that demanded constant restraint. For decades, he walked behind the Queen in public, kept the focus on her, and carried out duties that weren't always about his own interests. But he did it anyway, without complaint, without stepping out of line. That level of commitment doesn't get talked about enough. By 2017, he had given everything he had to give. And what Anne wants people to understand is simple but powerful. The Queen gave him something meaningful in return. Not distance, not separation, but freedom inside their marriage. Freedom to slow down, to paint, to read, to live quietly without constant expectations. Freedom to exist without protocol shaping every second of the day. And the key part? This wasn't just accepted, it was supported, encouraged, protected. That's the truth Princess Anne is putting out there. The separate homes weren't a weakness, they were proof of how strong the relationship really was. After 70 years together, they still respected each other's needs in a way most people never reach. That's not failure. That's next-level understanding. Now think about it. How many couples can honestly say that after that much time? Not many. To really understand why Wood Farm mattered so much to Philip, you have to look at its history. This wasn't just a random cottage. It had deep roots in royal life, going back decades. It carried both light and heavy moments, all tied into one place. The royal family started using Wood Farm in 1967, when Philip himself chose it as a quiet retreat. It became a space away from the pressure, away from the cost and formality of the main Sandringham house. Over time, it turned into one of the few places where the family could actually relax and be themselves. Prince Charles used it during his younger years, hosting gatherings and returning to it later as a personal escape. Princess Diana stayed there before her engagement was announced, back when everything still felt new and full of hope. Catherine Middleton also visited early in her relationship with Prince William, marking a key moment in how serious things were becoming. But Wood Farm isn't only tied to warm memories, it also holds a quieter, more difficult chapter, one that rarely gets discussed. Back in 1917, King George V and Queen Mary made a decision that still raises questions today. Their youngest son, Prince John, was dealing with severe epileptic seizures that were getting worse over time. Public life became too much, too unpredictable. So he was moved to Wood Farm, away from the main royal household. He lived there for 2 years, out of the spotlight, separated from the center of royal life. And in 1919, at just 13 years old, he passed away there. It's a heavy part of history that sits quietly behind the cottage's peaceful image. But somehow, Wood Farm carried both sides, the joy and the pain, and continued to serve as a place where the royal family could step back, reset, and find a sense of calm away from everything else. When Philip chose Wood Farm for his retirement, it wasn't random, it was personal on a deep level. This was a place filled with family history, a place he had shaped years earlier, a place that actually felt like home. Not a palace, not a building tied to royal duty, but a real home where he could finally just be himself. Then everything changed in March 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic hit Britain fast and hard, and suddenly the situation became serious. At 98 years old, Philip was in the highest risk group. His age, his heart condition, and the natural effects of time made the setup he had been living in no longer safe. For 3 years, the system had worked. Philip at Wood Farm, the Queen continuing her duties. But now that distance wasn't an option anymore. The risk was too high to ignore. So Philip made a move that said everything without needing words. He left Wood Farm and went to Windsor Castle to be with the Queen. For the first time in years, they were living fully together again. Day to day, side by side, in a quiet and controlled environment with very limited staff. Royal insiders later called it the HMS Bubble, a small protected world cut off from the chaos outside. And this is where it really hits. This was a couple in their late 90s, married for over 70 years. By tabloid standards, people had labeled them as distant, disconnected, living separate lives. But the moment real danger showed up, there was no hesitation at all. No drama, no back and forth, just action. Philip went straight to Windsor to be with Elizabeth. That doesn't look like a broken relationship. It looks solid. It looks like something built on decades of trust and understanding. When it mattered most, they were exactly where they needed to be, together. During that time, something shifted. Away from schedules, away from public pressure, they had space to just exist together again. No constant duties, no packed calendars, just quiet days in each other's presence. Even as Philip's health declined, as hospital visits became more frequent, they were there for each other in a way that royal life had often complicated. Prince Philip passed away on April 9, 2021, at Windsor Castle. He was 99 years old. And notice this? He didn't pass away at Wood Farm, the place of his retirement. He passed at Windsor, where he had chosen to be with the Queen during the most uncertain time. In the end, they were side by side. Now here's where the story becomes even more powerful. What happened after his death reveals a truth that no headline ever captured. Queen Elizabeth II, known for her composure and discipline, a woman who had faced wars, crises, and personal loss without breaking in public, was deeply affected by this loss. She didn't show it openly, but those close to her could see it in the quiet moments. And where did she go? She went back to Wood Farm, not once, but again and again. She traveled to Sandringham and chose to stay in that cottage. Not the main house, not the grand residence, but Philip's space. the place he had made his own. His paintings were still on the walls, his kitchen untouched, everything just as he left it. She returned around February 6th, a date that meant everything to her. The anniversary of her father's death, the moment in 1952 when her entire life changed, when she became queen and Philip became her consort. That day shaped their entire journey together, and she chose to spend that time at Wood Farm, surrounded by his presence. That choice speaks loud. She wasn't avoiding memories, she was holding on to them. Think about what that really means. Going back to the place where the person you loved felt most at peace. Sitting in rooms they arranged, looking at the art they created, standing in the same kitchen where you shared simple moments together. That's not distance. That's connection that doesn't fade. That's someone reaching for closeness even after loss. In the final stretch of her life, between April 2021 and September 2022, she returned to Wood Farm multiple times. The cottage became more than just a place. It became something deeply meaningful. A quiet reminder of what their life together really was when everything else was stripped away. So what does all of this actually tell us? Because this story isn't just about two public figures. It says something bigger about relationships. People often think a strong relationship means doing everything together, always being close, always sharing the same space. That constant togetherness has been pushed as the ideal for years. And when couples do things differently, separate rooms, time apart, different routines, it gets labeled as a problem. People assume something must be wrong. But Philip and Elizabeth's relationship challenges that idea completely. For over 70 years, they showed a different way. From the very beginning, they kept separate bedrooms, not out of distance, but out of understanding. They knew that rest, privacy, and personal space actually support a strong connection. Because you can't fully show up for someone if you never get space to be yourself. When Philip retired, that idea expanded. He stayed at Wood Farm, she continued her role, and they made it work in a way that fit both of them. They stayed connected, they spent time together, and they respected each other's needs. And when things got serious in 2020, they didn't hesitate. They came back together instantly. That balance between independence and unity is what made their relationship last. Princess Anne's message isn't really about where they lived, it's about how they loved. A kind of love that doesn't control, doesn't cling, doesn't demand constant closeness. A love that says, I understand you and I respect what you need, even if that means space. That kind of connection isn't easy. It takes time, trust, and a real understanding of each other. Most people don't reach that level because it takes years of paying attention and growing together. Philip and Elizabeth had 73 years to build that, and they honored it all the way to the end. Now let's address the part that can't be ignored. The tabloids got this completely wrong. For years, stories pushed the idea that their living situation meant problems, distance, even tension. But those claims were built on assumptions, not reality. And that matters because it shaped how people viewed a relationship that was actually strong and steady. Princess Anne has made it clear. Her parents weren't distant, they were adapted. They found a way that worked for them, even if it didn't fit the usual image people expect. The real story is simple. A man who gave decades of service earned the right to live quietly. A woman who carried a lifelong responsibility continued to do so with full commitment. And together, they supported each other's paths without losing their connection. And when the moment came to stand side by side, they did exactly that. That's not a failed relationship, that's a lasting one. And here's the image that stays with you. After Philip passed, the Queen, at 95 years old, chose to spend time in a quiet farmhouse in Norfolk. She cooked in his kitchen, walked through his rooms, and looked at the paintings he left behind. Not because she had to, but because that's where she felt closest to him. If that doesn't show what their marriage really was, nothing will. Princess Anne didn't just speak out, she cleared the picture. Philip and Elizabeth didn't live apart because something was wrong. They lived that way because their relationship was strong enough to allow it. Separate rooms, separate spaces, eventually separate homes, and still one of the most enduring partnerships of modern times. And when you really sit with all of this, it forces you to rethink everything you thought you knew about love. Not the movie version, not the perfect social media version, but the real version that actually lasts. Because what Philip and Elizabeth had wasn't built on constant closeness or public displays. It was built on understanding, on knowing when to step forward and when to step back, on giving each other room without ever letting go of the connection that mattered most. That's what makes this story hit differently. It's not loud, It's not dramatic in the way people expect. It's steady, it's intentional, and it's incredibly strong. The kind of strong that doesn't need to prove itself every day because it's already been proven over decades. And think about how rare that really is. 73 years is not just time. It's change, pressure, responsibility, sacrifice. It's two people growing, adjusting, and choosing each other again and again, even when life looks completely different from how it started. They didn't follow a script. They didn't try to fit into what people thought a relationship should look like. They built something that worked for them, and they stood by it, no matter how it looked from the outside. That's the part people missed. The tabloids saw distance and assumed disconnection. But what was really there was trust on a level most people never reach. The kind where you don't need constant reassurance because you already know where you stand. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. Strong relationships aren't about being inseparable every second. They're about being secure enough to stand apart when needed, without fear that something will break. Because in the end, when it truly mattered, they came back together without hesitation. No questions, no doubts, just certainty. That kind of response doesn't come from something weak, that comes from something deeply rooted. And then there's that final image that stays with you. The Queen, alone but not really alone, walking through Wood Farm. Seeing his paintings, touching the spaces he shaped, standing in the quiet that still held his presence. That's not distance. That's connection that outlives everything. It shows that what they had didn't depend on where they lived or how often they were seen together. It existed on a level that didn't fade with time, distance, or even loss. And honestly, that kind of love is rare. Not because it's impossible, but because it takes patience, respect, and a level of understanding that most people never fully reach. So when people look back at their story, it shouldn't be through the lens of headlines or assumptions. It should be seen for what it actually was, a partnership that evolved, adapted, and stayed strong through everything life threw at it. Not perfect, not always conventional, but real. And maybe that's why this story matters so much right now. Because it challenges the idea that love has to look a certain way to be valid. It reminds you that sometimes the strongest connections are the ones that don't need to be constantly seen to be real. Philip and Elizabeth didn't just stay together, they understood each other. And in the end, that made all the difference.